In today's video, we're going to be discussing the top players from the 2018 World Junior Championships who haven't been drafted yet and how this tournament may have affected their stock in the draft coming up this summer. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, we review and discuss all 31 NHL teams as well as international tournaments. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider hitting that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything. Alright, so let's discuss the top undrafted players from the 2018 World Junior Championships. I'm mainly going to focus on the players expected to go in the top 5 as they were all dominant in this tournament in one way or another. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on their performance and how this is going to impact their draft selections coming up this summer. Obviously, they have lots of hockey left that they can play to change the scouting community's mind again. Obviously, it's going to be debated over and over and over again by many NHL teams as we get ready to approach the summertime. There's still lots of time for things to be impacted, but as of right now, I'm going to give you my thoughts on these players. Overall, number one, right now, Rasmus Dahlin is expected to go number 1. He's a player that I think really stood out in this tournament. He was voted top defenseman of the tournament, and even though I didn't completely agree with that selection, I think he was certainly worthy to be in the conversation for that award, and I think he proved that he's quite a dynamic player. Personally, as of right now, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't go number 1. I just don't think that any of the other top ranking players in the draft are going to surpass him. For starters, majority of the other players are forwards, and when you can get a stud defenseman number 1, who's a dynamic player like him, you take advantage of it because they don't come very often. If you look around the NHL, how many teams have a really top stud defenseman, that you can compare with a Carlson or a Hedman or a Doughty? Those types of players don't come along every day, so when you get the opportunity, you do it. So I think there's very little doubt, unless something drastic changes between now and the summer, that Rasmus Dahlin goes number 1 overall in the 2018 entry draft. And I don't think this tournament had any negative impact on him whatsoever. If anything, I think it created an extra level of separation between him and the other players. I think he really stood up to be that good. So as of right now, I think if you asked 10 hockey experts, I think you'd get 10 out of 10 that said Dahlin would go number 1 as of right now. The other selections to keep an eye on right now, the last junior selection draft ranking I've seen from TSN, Svechnikov from Russia was expected to go number 2, and to be completely honest, I was very underwhelmed by his performance. I mean, there's still a pretty good chance. I think he'll definitely go in the top 5, but Team Russia as a whole really didn't have a great tournament. And not only was it that they had some tough opponents to play, I mean, you can almost argue that, but the team just didn't look energized. They looked to be a tad bit on, just not hardworking and not very creative. And when you get a player of his level that's supposed to be a top pick in the draft, I just expected more. I mean, even Quinn, who was drafted by the St. Louis Blues, he didn't do too badly. He was probably their top player in my opinion. But Svechnikov just, I don't know. I watched a couple of the Russian games, and he just didn't stand out to me like some of the other guys did. So I can see this tournament having a negative impact on his draft, and I could see him maybe dropping from a number 2 selection, maybe down to a 4, 5, 6. I think he'll still go pretty high. But as of right now, if I was a scout and I was ranking these players, he would drop down on the list after this tournament for me. If you look at another player that really stood out was United States forward Brady Tkachuk. Tkachuk was, if you look at different draft rankings, he's probably either 4 or 5, generally probably fairly consensual number 5 pick. Brady Tkachuk really stood out for me as a top player in this tournament. He did fantastic. I mean, he's got all the qualities of his brother Matthew, except he's got a little bit more finishing touch around the net. I think any team would be happy to have this guy. He's a second generation NHL player. He plays a lot like his dad, and I think Brady Tkachuk has a very bright future. I would not be surprised if this tournament propelled him up, especially where I mentioned that, for me at least, Svechnikov underwhelmed. I could see his stock going down and see Brady Tkachuk's going up. So Brady Tkachuk for me is a top player. I know any team I think should be delighted to get this guy on their team. Another player to keep your eye on that's expected to go in the top 5 right now for the 2018 entry draft is defenseman from the United States, Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes, I think, played a pretty solid tournament. For me, I'm going to say that this tournament didn't really change much for him and where he stands in the draft. I think he had an okay tournament. He wasn't a standout, but he certainly didn't appear, like it didn't do anything to harm his game either. He played a pretty decent tournament. Usually when you're a defender, especially if you're not a top pair defender and you're not getting mentioned a lot, it's usually a good thing. If you're the type of defenseman that can be a little bit more of an offensive punch, then sometimes you get a little bit more recognition, and I think he has that potential. But right now, like, it's kind of, for me, watching a lot of the USA games, he kind of flew under the radar. Like, you knew he was there, but you weren't really calling him out for any mistakes, which at his age I think is great. So for me, I think Quinn Hughes is a type of player who is expected to go around the 4 or 5 mark and is probably going to stay just exactly where he is. Now, another player that really stood out for me was the Czech Republic, Filip Zadina of the Halifax Mooseheads. This guy can play, and if I had to say anything, I think there's a possibility we may see him move up a little bit too. He is proven to be quite a dynamic player. He's having an excellent season before he left for this tournament in Halifax, and I think Filip Zadina really cemented himself as a top 5 choice for me. For me coming in, I know I hadn't seen him play a whole lot. I've seen a few of his highlights, but for me, who I follow hockey quite closely and I know a lot about these prospects, he really jumped out to me as a top player. So I guess it kind of depends on, obviously we don't know who's going to be picking where in the NHL draft. The draft lottery obviously is a ways away from being completed as the NHL season is still going on. So I think if you look at a player like Zadina and Hughes, it kind of depends on what the team needs. If they're looking for a top defenseman, maybe Hughes goes ahead of Zadina. But if you're looking for a dynamic forward, then Zadina is your guy. So in my opinion, I think Dahlin really cemented himself as a top pick. I think Svechnikov might see his stock drop a little bit, because if it were me doing the selections, I'd be underwhelmed from him. But I was really impressed with Tkachuk and Zadina. Those 2 guys would move up, and I think Hughes would probably stand pat. So for me, I'd almost go Dahlin. Then you're looking at probably Tkachuk, Zadina, 2-3. Kind of depends on what you need, but you could see a player like Svechnikov really improve and kind of move his way back up. But you're gonna see Dahlin and Hughes will be the top 2 defensemen most likely to go in the draft, and it kind of just really boils down to who's picking, I guess. Then you got Zadina, Tkachuk, and Svechnikov as your top 3 forwards. So that's more likely going to be your top 5 picks in the draft. I think the order will change a little bit, but I don't see Dahlin, barring something significant happen, coming out of that number 1 draft spot. So I hope you enjoyed the World Junior Tournament. I hope you enjoyed our coverage. Certainly consider liking this video if you liked the video. Check out, we do have a playlist made for the World Juniors as well. So if you missed any of the action, you want to get caught up on all the different actions, we did a preview and a recap video of all the different days of the tournament, covering the whole thing start to finish. So I hope you enjoyed getting our coverage, and I hope you had a chance to watch some of these players. Certainly keep your eye out in the 2018 draft for some of these players, as there's going to be a lot of talent. It's supposed to be a deep draft, and we got a nice sneak preview of a lot of the top guys. So I hope you enjoyed the video again. Consider subscribing if you're new to the channel, and we'll be talking to you soon.